Welcome to the deep dive, everybody.
Mm.
We're going to be looking at something a little different today.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to do a deep dive into a single story,
Okay.
a fictional story about a family.
All right.
And they live on a farm, but this is not like your typical, happy family on a farm.
Nice.
We're talking strange dreams, a family dog that just vanishes and never comes back,
Oh, wow.
a tragic accident, and a cover-up that really has some serious consequences for everybody involved.
That sounds intense. What can you tell me about this family?
Well, they're called the Barnes family.
Mhm.
George, the father, is very hardworking, very practical, but you get the feeling that there's, a lot going on under the surface, especially after his mother's funeral.
Interesting.
And then there's Emily. She's the mother, and she's really warm and chatty, but unfortunately she dies very early in the story.
Oh.
And then we have their two sons, Ford, the older brother. He seems to be shouldering a lot of responsibility, even though he's so young. And then there's Justin, the younger brother, who's very quiet, almost unsettlingly logical.
That's an interesting mix of personalities.
Yeah, and that funeral scene for George's mother that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
it was so powerful, especially when they mentioned that her jaw was wired shut.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
It's almost like a premonition
Uh-huh.
of all the things that the family's not saying, all the secrets and silences that they have to keep.
Like it becomes this symbol of everything they're holding back.
Yeah, exactly. And, George has this real deep distrust of the government and anyone in a position of authority.
Oh.
He feels like the world is against him, that he has to protect his family no matter what.
It makes you wonder where that distrust comes from.
Absolutely.
I mean, was it always there?
Well, and then something really strange happens. Woofy, the family dog, just disappears.
Oh, no.
1 minute he's there, the next, poof, he's gone.
Wow.
And Ford, the older brother, is clinging to hope that he'll, find his way back home.
Of course.
But Justin, the younger brother, oh, he's so matter-of-fact about it.
Really?
Totally logical. He figures Woofy's dead, probably eaten by coyotes.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I can see how that would be a tough pill to swallow for Ford.
Oh, definitely. It's such a small detail.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks volumes about their personalities.
I see what you mean. You have Ford, who's still holding on to some innocence, and then you have Justin, who's already sort of jaded.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes you think, though, could this loss do more than just, a pet dying? Could this actually be a catalyst for Justin becoming so detached, almost foreshadowing, how chillingly logical he is later in the story?
It's funny you should say that because I was thinking the same thing.
Really?
We often don't realize the impact that losing a pet can have on a family, especially for kids.
That's so true.
And for Justin, who already seems to have trouble connecting with people, losing Woofy could be a real turning point.
It's like he loses a part of himself right along with that dog.
Exactly. And after Woofy disappears, it seems like the Barnes family retreats even further into their own world. They become even more isolated, more suspicious of anyone outside their little circle.
Right.
And then the story takes this really, really dark turn.
What happens?
Emily dies.
Oh, no. How?
It's a tractor accident. It's so sudden, so brutal. I mean, the tractor, it's this symbol of, hard work, rural life.
Yeah.
And it becomes this instrument of tragedy. It's incredibly powerful,
I can imagine. And how does the family react?
Well, that's where things go from, just tragic to something a lot darker. They decide to bury Emily on their land.
On their land.
Yeah, and they don't tell anyone.
Wow. So they're not going to report her death.
No. They're going to keep it a secret.
That's a huge decision. It's like they've crossed this line,
Yeah, it's this turning point where they decide to hide from the truth, to create this whole elaborate lie about Emily running off to some artist colony in New Mexico.
That's a big lie to maintain.
Oh, it is. But secrets have a way of eating away at you,
You can't just bury something like that and expect it to go away.
Exactly. And in this case, the cover-up becomes this huge weight that just crushes them.
You see that in George, right? His mental state starts to deteriorate.
Yes. And he starts to lean more and more on scripture,
Oh.
like twisting biblical passages to try and justify what he's done.
It sounds like he's trying to build a wall around himself and his family.
Yeah, a wall made of fear in scripture. He really believes that the world is out to get them and that he has to protect his sons at all costs.
So the grief and the guilt are manifesting as paranoia.
Exactly. And while George is, spiraling like this, Justin's behavior starts to get really strange.
Strange how.
He eats crickets constantly, like all the time.
Crickets.
And he's always muttering to himself. And he becomes obsessed with violence. It's almost animalistic.
It sounds like he's regressing.
Right.
Given all that he's going through, it's not surprising, is it?
No, not really. But still, it's chilling.
Think about the pressure cooker that Justin is living in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got all this trauma, he's lost his mother, he's dealing with fear, and who knows what else is going on in that house.
Right.
And on top of all that, he doesn't have any healthy ways to cope with it.
I wonder if the cricket eating is some sort of subconscious attempt to, control something. To find something that he can depend on in a world that feels totally chaotic.
I think you're right. It's like he's trying to become self-sufficient, to survive on his own terms.
And the violence. Do you think that's a way for him to try to understand the power dynamics,
Maybe.
to feel like he has some agency when everything else feels totally out of control?
It's a disturbing thought, but it makes sense.
Doesn't it? And then things escalate even further when the police show up at the farm.
Oh, how does that happen?
Well, Ford goes into town to buy shoes.
Shoes?
Yeah, and he runs into a police officer who recognizes him.
Oh, no.
And then Jack, a family friend who also happens to be a cop, he visits the farm.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not.
Yeah.
Those two seemingly small events,
Yeah.
they completely unravel everything.
Wow. It's like the walls are closing in on them.
They are. The fragile world that they've built starts to crumble.
That's when the standoff happens, right?
Mhm. George ends up holding Jack hostage in the barn.
Oh, wow.
And the police surround the property. And the boys, they're caught right in the middle of it all.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like for them.
It's terrifying. All the choices they've made, all the secrets they've kept, all the fear that's been eating away at them,
Yeah.
it all comes to a head.
They've retreated so far into their own little world that there's no way out.
Exactly. It's a powder keg waiting to explode.
And when it does,
The consequences are devastating.
it's like this whole standoff becomes almost a representation of their struggle, Their struggle against everything outside of their farm.
Right.
Almost symbolic in a way. This family holed up in this barn armed with whatever they can find.
Right.
Just trying to hold on to this reality that they created.
Yeah, and it's interesting because amidst all this fear and tension,
Yeah.
there's this scene where the boys, Ford and Justin,
Yeah.
they're in the barn washing carrots.
Watching carrots.
Yeah.
In the middle of all of this.
Yes. It's such a normal, everyday thing.
Right.
But it's happening against this backdrop of just utter chaos.
Wow. That's a powerful image. It's like they're trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah, exactly.
Even in this crazy situation, they're clinging to this routine.
It makes you think about how we all have these coping mechanisms, these little things we do to get through tough times.
Oh, absolutely. We all do.
Even in the most extreme situations, we still crave those moments of normalcy.
Those routines, those everyday things, they can be a lifeline. They give you structure, they give you a sense of control when everything else feels so unpredictable and frightening.
I agree. But in this case, that normalcy is just an illusion.
Right.
The reality is this family is falling apart.
And it all leads to this devastating climax.
Yeah. During this standoff, Jack, the family friend and cop, he tries to reason with George.
Yeah.
But George is just too far gone. He's totally consumed by paranoia and fear.
So what happens?
The boys end up shooting Jack.
They shoot him?
Yeah, they wound him with the .2 rifle.
Wow. I mean, those are the same kids who were just washing carrots.
I know, right?
It's like this turning point where they cross a line.
It shows how much their father's paranoia has affected them.
They've been living in this world of isolation and fear for so long.
And now they're actively participating in the violence.
And what did the police do?
Well, they realize how serious the situation is, and they exhume Emily's body.
So they finally find out the truth.
Yeah.
What does George do?
It sends him over the edge. I mean, think about it. It's like this symbolic violation.
Yeah.
This illusion that he created is shattered,
He's losing everything.
and his world is collapsing around him. So he lashes out.
What does he do?
It's a final act of defiance, and it leads to his death. He comes out of the barn, and a sniper takes him down.
Wow. So that's the end for George. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
No, it doesn't. We're left with this really chilling image of Justin standing in the middle of all the wreckage.
Yeah.
And he says something about sending a message.
A message.
Yeah, about becoming a porcupine.
A porcupine. What do you think he means by that?
It's such a powerful metaphor. A porcupine, it's covered in these sharp quills. It's not aggressive, but it's ready to protect itself.
Right.
I think for Justin, it represents a kind of self-sufficiency,
Okay.
a way to survive in a world that he sees as hostile and dangerous.
He's been through so much. He's lost his mother. He's been isolated from the world. He's witnessed his father's descent into madness. And now, this violent end to it all.
It's like he's decided that the only way to protect himself is to shut everyone out.
To become prickly.
Yeah.
He's internalized all that violence.
It really makes you think about the lasting impact of trauma on children.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and how hard it is to break free from these destructive patterns.
It would be easy to just look at the story and say, oh, the Barnes family, they're crazy, they're evil.
Right.
But I think we have to remember that things aren't always so black and white.
Yeah, I mean, was George really just evil?
Right.
He did some terrible things, but there was also this like messed up sense of love there,
Yeah.
like he was desperate to protect his family.
He was definitely a troubled man.
Yeah,
So much grief, paranoia, and that deep distrust of authority.
right.
His actions were wrong, no question.
Right.
But you can kind of see how they came from this place of pain. Like he was clinging to this belief system as his whole world was falling apart.
This deep dive has been really, really something. We've talked about how complicated families can be, the damage that isolation and trauma can do, and how hard it can be to tell what's right and wrong sometimes. What are some of the big takeaways that you hope our listeners will think about?
Well, I think this story really shows us how important mental health awareness is.
Yeah,
We need to be able to see the signs of distress in ourselves and other people,
absolutely.
and we have to create a space where people feel like they can ask for help without feeling ashamed or judged.
It also shows how dangerous paranoia and distrust can be when they go unchecked.
Right.
I mean, the Barnes family, they isolated themselves from everyone,
Yeah.
and they retreated into this world of their own making, and that ultimately led to their downfall.
It's a reminder that we need to be critical thinkers. We have to look at different points of view
Yeah.
and be careful about people who try to scare us and turn us against each other.
You can't forget about the kids, Ford and Justin.
Oh, absolutely not. They were victims in all of this, too.
Yeah.
Their future is so uncertain.
It is.
But we need to fight for systems that understand trauma, that focus on helping people heal and not just punishing them.
This case really shows that violence just leads to more violence.
It's a vicious cycle.
And it can be really hard to break, but we have to try.
We do. It starts with understanding what causes violence in the first place and building a world where kids feel safe and supported and have a chance to really thrive, not just survive.
Well said. Well, this has been quite a deep dive, intense and emotional.
It has.
But in the end, I think there's a bit of hope here.
Oh, definitely.
We can choose to be more aware, more compassionate, more active in building a world where tragedies like this don't happen as often.
I agree. This story doesn't give us all the answers, but
Right.
it does make us want to be better people, and that's something we should all strive for.
Listener, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you'll think about what we talked about. Consider the questions that this story raises, and let this experience change how you interact with the world. Even in the darkest stories, there's always a bit of hope, and it's up to all of us to help that hope grow. To build a world where empathy wins over fear and understanding leads us toward a brighter future.